You're not good enough to work in my restaurant.
Then hold me responsible.
You're finished here.
Tyler keeps his job.
What exactly are you doing?
You're measuring the wrong thing. Miss Brooks, tomorrow's Caldwell Partnership meeting is confirmed for 9.
You're not good enough to work in one of my restaurants. Ethan Caldwell didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. At 52, the billionaire CEO had spent enough years inside glass boardrooms to know that power sounded strongest when spoken quietly. The dining room of Caldwell and Rowe went still around him. Forks hovered above plates. A server stopped beside the bar. Near table 12, 25-year-old Nia Brooks stood in her white collared shirt and bright red apron, one hand holding a tray, her warm brown eyes fixed steadily on the man who had just ended her job. 5 minutes earlier, a wine glass had shattered beside one of the restaurant's most important guests. A dinner order had been delayed. The guest complained. Ethan had arrived during his unannounced inspection at exactly the wrong moment and asked exactly one question. Who was responsible? Nia could have pointed toward Tyler Reed, the 17-year-old busboy standing near the kitchen doors with panic written across his face. She could have explained that Tyler had entered the wrong table number while covering for an employee who had called in sick. She could have mentioned that she had caught the mistake before the entrees reached the table. Instead, Nia looked at Ethan and said, "I was handling the table, sir." That was enough for him. Ethan adjusted the silver cuff of his charcoal suit. His expression carried the faint impatience of a man accustomed to rooms correcting themselves when he entered them. "This location represents my name," he said. "I expect excellence." Nia glanced toward Tyler. The boy looked ready to disappear into the kitchen. "Then hold me responsible," she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. There was something about her calmness he mistook for indifference. "I just did." The restaurant manager shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Caldwell, Nia has one of our strongest customer ratings. Tonight she doesn't." Ethan looked back at her. "You're finished here." A few customers pretended not to listen. Nia stood perfectly still. Rent was due in 6 days. Her checking account held less than $400. The laptop waiting on her kitchen table had a cracked hinge she couldn't afford to replace. None of that appeared on her face. She set the tray down, untied the red apron, folded it once, then twice. She removed her black name tag and placed it carefully on top. Ethan watched her, perhaps expecting an argument. None came. "Mr. Caldwell," Nia said. "Tyler keeps his job." It wasn't a question. Ethan glanced toward the frightened teenager. "Why does that matter to you right now?" Nia's genuine smile appeared for barely a second. Tired. Warm. Almost impossible to understand. Because losing mine doesn't mean he should lose his. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, but only for a moment. Nia turned toward the kitchen to collect her belongings. Halfway there, she stopped beside the manager's station. A printed inventory report lay beneath the register. She studied it for 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Then she picked up a receipt and wrote several numbers across the back. "What are you doing?" the manager asked. Nia placed the receipt beside the report. "Your food cost problem isn't coming from the kitchen." Ethan heard her. "Excuse me." She looked at him one final time. "You're measuring the wrong thing." Then she walked out carrying nothing but her purse and an old laptop bag. The manager stared after her, shook his head, and tossed the receipt toward the trash. Ethan reached down before it landed. 3 numbers. 1 percentage. A short equation. He looked toward the front doors, but Nia Brooks was already gone. For reasons he couldn't explain, the billionaire slipped the receipt into his jacket pocket. By tomorrow morning, that little piece of paper would be sitting on a polished boardroom table, and the waitress he had just declared not good enough would be walking through the door as the one person everyone in that room had been waiting to meet. Before we continue, if you enjoy unforgettable stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary moments, subscribe to Hidden Tables. Every story reminds us that true character is revealed through courage, compassion, and the choices we make when no one is watching. Now, let's see what happens next. By the time Nia Brooks stepped through the restaurant doors, the evening air had turned cool enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. She stood beneath the awning for a moment, listening to traffic move through downtown Chicago, horns in the distance, tires whispering across damp pavement. Behind her, Caldwell and Rowe glowed through tall windows, warm and expensive, filled with people continuing dinners that had nothing to do with whether she could pay rent next week. Nia reached into her purse for her phone. 3 missed calls. 1 from her landlord. 2 from a number she recognized immediately. She stared at the second number longer. Meridian Ventures. She had been waiting nearly 4 months for that call. Tonight, of all nights, they had called twice. She slipped the phone back into her purse without listening to the messages. Not yet. First, she needed 5 quiet minutes where nobody expected anything from her. Inside the restaurant, Tyler found her near the employee entrance before she could leave the block. He had run outside without his jacket. Nia. She turned. The teenager was breathing hard. Why did you do that? She already knew what he meant. Go back inside. It is cold. You lost your job because of me. No, her voice stayed gentle. I lost my job because a man made a decision before asking enough questions. Tyler looked toward the windows. I should tell him. Nia shook her head. You should finish your shift. Then tomorrow, you should be better than you were today. Tyler lowered his eyes. That is it. That is plenty. She reached over and straightened his crooked tie. And stop entering table numbers from memory. Check the ticket. A reluctant smile crossed his face. Yes, ma'am. I am 25, Tyler. Do not call me ma'am. He laughed softly, and that was enough. Nia watched him return inside before walking 3 blocks to the train station. 40 minutes later, she unlocked the door of her small apartment on the south side. The place was modest but orderly. A second-hand couch, 2 plants near the window, a narrow kitchen table covered with notebooks, printed reports, and a laptop held together at one hinge with black electrical tape. Nia dropped her purse onto the chair and finally played the voicemail. Ms. Brooks, this is Rebecca Lane from Meridian Ventures. The Caldwell Hospitality Partnership meeting has been confirmed for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The board reviewed your revised model and wants you presenting personally. Please call me when you receive this. Nia closed her eyes. Of course it was Caldwell. She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she made coffee and opened her laptop. On the screen waited 3 years of work. Restaurant purchasing records, waste patterns, staffing ratios, weather changes, reservation behavior, thousands of observations collected between double shifts, late trains, and nights when sleep had become optional. She had started the model after noticing something corporate reports kept missing. Restaurants did not waste money only because kitchens ordered too much. They wasted it because purchasing systems treated human behavior like a fixed number. Rain changed orders. Sporting events changed arrival times. Neighborhood paydays changed menu choices. Even the difference between a Tuesday convention crowd and a Saturday family crowd mattered. Nia understood those patterns because she had lived among them. She opened the latest Caldwell data Meridian had legally provided for the partnership evaluation. Her eyes moved across the figures, then stopped. The same discrepancy she had noticed at the restaurant appeared across 12 locations. She leaned closer. There you are, she whispered. Across town, Ethan Caldwell sat alone in his office with the crumpled receipt beside a quarterly report. He had asked his finance team to check Nia's numbers. They had. Twice. The answer waiting in his inbox was only 6 words long. Her calculation appears to be correct. Ethan leaned back slowly. On his desk, tomorrow's partnership folder remained unopened. For the first time that evening, he looked at the name printed across its cover. Nia Brooks. At 6:15 the next morning, Nia was already awake. She had slept for less than 4 hours, though nothing in the careful way she moved suggested exhaustion. The apartment was still dark except for the amber light above the stove and the pale glow of her laptop. Coffee steamed beside a notebook filled with arrows, percentages, and handwritten questions. Nia read the Caldwell figures again. 12 restaurants. Different neighborhoods. Different customer patterns. Same hidden weakness. She drew a line beneath one number, then another. The company was forecasting demand by location, season, and reservation volume. but it was treating each restaurant like a building instead of a living room full of changing people. She had seen the consequences from 6 feet away, carrying plates. By 7:30, Nia closed the laptop and stood before her bedroom mirror. No red apron today. She chose a navy blazer she had bought for a college presentation years earlier, a cream blouse, black slacks, and simple flats. Nothing expensive, nothing borrowed to look important. Her natural curls were gathered into the same high ponytail she wore at work. She looked like herself. That mattered. Across downtown, Ethan Caldwell had been in his office since before sunrise. He had not slept much either. The receipt from the restaurant rested beside his keyboard, flattened now beneath a glass paperweight. His finance team had sent a longer analysis overnight. Nia's calculation had not merely been correct. It had identified a pattern Caldwell Hospitality had been paying consultants to explain for nearly 8 months. Ethan read the report twice, then opened the partnership folder. The first page carried a photograph. Nia Brooks. Same warm brown eyes. Same composed expression. Below it were words he had not expected. Product architect. Operations researcher. Founder. Ethan removed his glasses and stared toward the Chicago skyline. He remembered the folded apron, the frightened busboy, her refusal to defend herself, then the sentence that had irritated him most. You are measuring the wrong thing. His assistant, Claire Morgan, appeared at the doorway at 8:20. The Meridian team arrives in 40 minutes. Ethan closed the folder. How long have we been evaluating their system? Almost 5 months. And nobody mentioned the founder worked at one of our restaurants. Claire hesitated. I do not think anybody knew. Ethan looked at her. Human resources knew. Human resources knew we employed a waitress named Nia Brooks. Meridian submitted its founder as Nia Brooks. Nobody thought to compare the two. There it was. Not a conspiracy. Not deception. Something more uncomfortable. Nobody had looked closely enough. Ethan stood and buttoned his jacket. What exactly does her model do? Claire placed a tablet on his desk. According to Meridian, it reduced food waste by 18% in a 6-location pilot and improved labor forecasting without cutting employee hours. Ethan glanced at the screen. Without cutting hours? That is apparently one of her conditions. A faint crease formed between his eyebrows. Conditions? She refuses to build efficiency models that treat workers as disposable costs. Ethan said nothing. At 8:52, Nia entered the Caldwell Hospitality Tower carrying the same battered laptop bag she had carried out of the restaurant. The lobby rose around her in marble, steel, and quiet money. At security, the receptionist checked her identification and immediately stood straighter. Ms. Brooks, they are expecting you upstairs. Nia almost smiled at the difference one appointment could make. She accepted the visitor badge and walked toward the elevators. On the 41st floor, Ethan entered the boardroom as executives arranged documents around a long walnut table. He took his usual seat at the head. At 8:59, the elevator chimed outside. Claire glanced through the glass wall. Her expression changed. Mr. Caldwell, she said quietly. Ethan already knew. Footsteps approached. Calm. Unhurried. Then the boardroom door opened, and Nia Brooks walked in carrying the laptop nobody at his restaurant had ever thought worth asking about. For 1 second, nobody in the boardroom spoke. Nia stood just inside the doorway with her battered laptop bag resting against her hip, while Ethan Caldwell watched her from the head of the long walnut table. Yesterday, she had stood beneath warm restaurant lights wearing a red apron and a black name tag. This morning, she wore a navy blazer and carried herself with the same quiet steadiness. That was what unsettled him most. Nothing about her had changed except the room around her. Rebecca Lane from Meridian Ventures stepped forward with an easy professional smile. Everyone, this is Nia Brooks, founder and product architect of Table Sense Operations. Chairs shifted. Several executives stood to greet her. Ethan remained still for half a heartbeat too long, then rose. Nia met his eyes. No triumph. No bitterness. Not even surprise. Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Her voice was calm enough to make yesterday feel louder than it had been. Ms. Brooks. Ethan gestured toward the open seat opposite him. Please. Nia sat, placed her laptop on the table, and connected it to the presentation screen. Claire watched Ethan carefully. She had worked for him for 9 years and knew the small signs other people missed. The way he aligned his pen when irritated. The way his jaw tightened when calculations failed. This morning, he did neither. He simply watched Nia. Rebecca began the introductions. Chief Financial Officer, Operations Director, Procurement Chief, Regional Managers. Then Martin Hale, a board member with 30 years in hospitality, leaned forward and studied Nia over his glasses. Your background says you have worked in restaurant service for nearly 6 years. That is correct, Nia said. And you developed an enterprise forecasting system while waiting tables? I developed it because I was waiting tables. Martin gave a polite smile that carried more doubt than warmth. Explain the difference. Nia clicked the first slide. 12 Caldwell locations appeared on the screen. Most forecasting systems begin with what customers bought. Mine begins with why their behavior changed. Ethan's attention sharpened. Nia continued. Last Thursday, your Michigan Avenue location overordered premium seafood by 23%. The system blamed lower reservations. That explanation is incomplete. She displayed weather records, convention schedules, local traffic data, and dining times. A major conference ended 6 hours early because of a schedule change. Your reservations stayed active, but hundreds of guests left downtown before dinner. The software counted booked tables. The staff downstairs saw empty chairs. Martin stopped smiling. Nia changed. Slides. Data tells you what happened. Floor workers often know why. Your company collects one and ignores the other. Ethan glanced toward his operations director. Do we collect employee observations in the forecasting process? The man cleared his throat. Not systematically. Nia did not look pleased by the answer. She simply continued. That is the gap. For the next 15 minutes, she moved through numbers without rushing. She spoke about servers noticing changing portion preferences, hosts seeing reservation patterns before reports caught them, kitchen workers recognizing waste days before accounting departments measured it. No grand claims. No performance. Just details. The kind people noticed when they spent years standing where executives rarely stood. Then Martin interrupted. Ms. Brooks, forgive me, but if this model is as effective as Meridian claims, why are you still working restaurant shifts? The question landed differently from the others. Nia paused. Ethan looked toward Martin, but she answered before he could speak. Because ideas do not pay rent while they are becoming businesses. Silence. Nia clicked to the next slide. And because working on the floor kept me close to the problem I was trying to solve. Rebecca smiled faintly. Ethan did not. He was remembering a red apron folded twice. Martin leaned back. Fair enough. Nia looked around the table. Before we continue, there is something everyone here should know. Her eyes settled on Ethan. Mr. Caldwell and I have met before. Claire lowered her gaze. Someone stopped typing. Martin looked between them. When Nia opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke first. Yesterday, the room turned toward him. His voice remained even. She worked at Caldwell and Rowe. A longer silence followed. Ethan placed both hands on the table. For once, there was no polished answer waiting behind his expression, and I made a decision about her before I understood what I was looking at. The silence after Ethan's admission felt different from the silence that had followed Nia into the room. This one had weight. Martin Hale slowly removed his glasses. Rebecca Lane stopped turning the pages of her presentation. Packet. Across the table, Caldwell executives looked toward their chief executive officer with the careful expressions of people suddenly aware that the meeting had acquired another layer. Nia remained seated. Her hands rested beside her laptop. What kind of decision? Martin asked. Ethan could have softened it. He could have called it a staffing matter, a misunderstanding, an unfortunate coincidence. Instead, he looked directly at Nia. I terminated her employment. Rebecca's eyebrows lifted. Yesterday evening. Martin glanced at Nia. And you still came here? Nia considered the question. This meeting was scheduled months before yesterday happened. That was not what I asked. I know. Her voice remained quiet. I came because the work deserves to be evaluated on the work. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. It was almost the same thing she had done at the restaurant. She had refused to let one person's mistake determine Tyler's future. Now she was refusing to let Ethan's mistake determine the future of her company. Martin leaned forward. Would you prefer Mr. Caldwell excuse himself from the evaluation? Ethan looked at Nia. She had every reason to say yes. Instead, she shook her head. No, why not? Because if Caldwell Hospitality becomes my partner, Mr. Caldwell will still be here tomorrow. I would rather know whether he can challenge my work fairly than build a partnership around avoiding an uncomfortable morning. Claire's eyes moved toward Ethan. Something in his posture changed. Not much. His shoulders settled back against the chair. The defensiveness she had expected never arrived. Then challenge it, Nia said. Ethan studied her. You are asking me? I am asking everyone. She turned toward the screen. Do not approve this because Meridian likes it. Do not approve it because the pilot performed well. And definitely do not approve it because yesterday became embarrassing. Martin almost smiled. What do you want us to do? Nia clicked to a new page filled with projections. Break it. That got the room's attention. Find the assumption I missed. Find the restaurant where the model fails. Find the employee behavior I misunderstood. If this system is going into more than 200 locations, I would rather have 12 people expose its weakness in this room than 12,000 employees discover it after launch. Ethan looked at the numbers. All right. His old sharpness returned, but without the contempt Nia had heard the night before. Your model gives employee observations significant weight. Human observations are inconsistent. Correct. They can also be biased. Correct. Then your strongest feature may also be your weakest. Nia nodded once. Now we are talking about the product. For the next 20 minutes, questions came quickly. Procurement challenged her weighting system. Finance challenged projected savings. Operations questioned whether busy servers would participate. Nia answered what she knew. More importantly, when she did not know, she said so. No bluffing. No polished detours. Then Claire noticed something buried in the pilot data. Wait. She enlarged a chart. Location 6. Nia turned. The projected demand and actual demand separated sharply for 3 consecutive weekends. Martin frowned. That is not a small miss. Ethan looked at Nia. 11.8%. The room became quiet again. Rebecca shifted in her chair. This was the kind of number that could change a partnership. Ethan expected Nia to defend the model. She did not. She stepped closer to the screen. Her eyes narrowed. Can you open the raw employee feedback from that location? Claire did. Nia read 3 entries. Then 5. Then she stopped. A slow understanding crossed her face. Good, she said. Martin stared at her. Good. Nia reached for a marker. Yes. She walked to the whiteboard and circled one assumption. Because this means the model did exactly what I told it to do. Ethan rose slightly from his chair. And you told it to do the wrong thing. Nia looked back at him. There was no embarrassment in her expression now. Only focus. Exactly. She uncapped the marker. So now we find out why. For the next several minutes, the whiteboard became the center of the room. Nia wrote 3 columns across it. Prediction, observation, response. Her handwriting was small and precise. Location 6 did not fail because the employees gave us bad information, she said. It failed because my system assumed their information meant the same thing every weekend. Ethan stepped closer to the screen. Explain. Nia pointed toward the employee feedback. 3 servers reported unusually large family groups. The model interpreted that as higher dinner demand and increased purchasing recommendations. Martin folded his arms. Which sounds reasonable. It was reasonable, Nia said. That is the problem. She pulled up the calendar for the neighborhood surrounding location 6. Youth soccer tournaments. 2 college graduation weekends. A regional dance competition. The events had brought families into the area, but many of those families ate earlier than the restaurant's normal dinner crowd. They ordered differently, shared appetizers, chose less expensive entrees, and left before peak hours. The model saw more people and predicted more traditional dinner demand. It had listened to the workers without understanding what they were actually describing. Ethan stared at the screen. So the data was accurate. Yes. The interpretation was wrong. Nia nodded. Mine was wrong. No hesitation. No excuse. She drew a line through her original assumption. Something about the gesture caught Ethan's attention. He had spent decades in meetings where highly paid people used 10 minutes of language to avoid saying those 3 words. Nia said them as if accuracy mattered more than pride. Claire leaned toward her tablet. Can it be corrected? I think so. You think? Martin asked. Nia looked at him. I know what caused the error. I will not pretend I know the best correction until I test it. Ethan's mouth tightened, though not with irritation. What would you need? Context categories tied to employee observations. Not just more data. Better questions. She began writing again. Family event. Business travel. Weather disruption. Local school schedule. Neighborhood event. A server should not need to become a data analyst, she continued. The system should make it easy for the person closest to the customer to tell us what changed. The procurement chief shook his head. That could mean retraining thousands of employees. Then do not call it training. Nia turned toward him. Ask them 4 questions at the end of a shift. Questions they already know the answers to because they were standing there. Ethan glanced at the executive team. Several people were taking notes now. Yesterday, those same kinds of observations would have been called comments from staff. Today, they were becoming operational intelligence. The irony was not lost on him. Martin tapped his pen against the table. There is another problem. Participation. Employees ignore optional corporate surveys. Nia gave a small nod. Usually because corporate surveys ask for information and give nothing back. What would you give back? Proof that someone listened. The room quieted. Nia returned to her laptop and opened a sample dashboard. If a server reports that families are arriving earlier because of a local tournament, next week the schedule adjusts. If kitchen staff reports repeated waste on one side dish, purchasing changes. People participate when their observations stop disappearing into a database. Ethan looked at the dashboard, then at Nia. You built this while working shifts. Mostly after them. How long? 3 years. Rebecca answered before anyone else could. Nia built the first version on a 7-year-old laptop while finishing online coursework at night. Nia gave her a brief look. She had not planned to mention that. Ethan noticed. Why did you leave college? He asked. The question came out quieter than the others. Nia paused. My mother got sick. Tuition became rent, groceries, and medical bills. By the time things stabilized, restaurant work was paying what needed to be paid. She looked back toward the whiteboard. So I kept learning differently. Nobody offered sympathy. Nia had not asked for it. Ethan lowered his gaze toward the notes in front of him. Yesterday, he had measured her entire worth during one difficult dinner service. This morning, she had discovered a weakness in her own creation, admitted it before a room full of decision-makers, and turned the flaw into a better question. Then Claire's tablet chimed. She opened a new message and frowned. There is something else. Ethan looked up. What? Claire rotated the tablet toward him. Human Resources sent the incident report from last night. Nia went still. Claire continued carefully. The mistake at table 12 was logged before Nia took responsibility for it. Ethan's eyes moved from the screen to Nia. Then you already knew it was not your mistake. Nia did not answer immediately. Across the boardroom, the numbers suddenly seemed less important. Yes, she said at last. I knew. Ethan did not move. The incident report glowed on Claire's tablet between them. A few ordinary lines of text carrying more weight than the financial projections covering the boardroom table. Why? He asked. Nia held his gaze. Because Tyler is 17. Martin looked between them. Tyler. The busboy from last night. Ethan said quietly. Nia nodded. His mother works 2 jobs. He helps with groceries and watches his younger sister after school. He made one mistake during a shift where we were short 2 people. Ethan's expression tightened. That does not explain why you claimed responsibility. I did not claim his mistake. I said I was handling the table. You knew how I would interpret that. No, Nia said. I knew how you might interpret it. The distinction landed cleanly. Ethan walked back toward his chair, but did not sit. You could have corrected me. I could have. You could have told me exactly what happened. Yes. Instead, you let me fire you. Nia's eyes softened, but her voice did not. You had already decided what kind of employee you were looking at. Nobody touched a keyboard now. Even Martin had stopped taking notes. Ethan glanced toward the windows. Chicago stretched beneath them, 41 floors below, all glass and morning light. From up here, everything looked organized. Streets became lines. Cars became dots. People disappeared entirely. That is not an answer, he said. Nia closed her laptop halfway. Then here is the answer. Tyler made a mistake. I was the senior server covering that section, and I could handle losing a shift better than he could handle losing his job. I thought if you slowed down long enough to ask what happened, we would explain it. But I did not. No 2 letters. No anger attached. Somehow that made them harder to hear. Claire looked down at the incident report. The manager knew? He knew Tyler entered the wrong table number, Nia said. He also knew I corrected it before the waitress left the kitchen. The broken glass happened afterward when the guest moved it too close to the edge of the table. Martin frowned. Then why was there a complaint? Because the guest had already been waiting. and people do not separate small frustrations once they are angry. Ethan looked toward Claire. Was any of this in the report I received last night? No. You made the termination decision before the final report was submitted. There it was. No villain to blame. No hidden scheme. Just speed. Authority. Assumption. Ethan slowly pulled out his chair and Saturday. I have spent 30 years telling managers that standards matter. Nia reopened her laptop. They do. He looked at her. You still believe that after last night? Of course. Then what did I get wrong? Nia considered him for a moment. You confused standards with certainty. Ethan said nothing. Standards tell you what good work looks like, she continued. Certainty tells you that you already know why someone failed. Those are not the same thing. Martin leaned back, studying Ethan now instead of Nia. Rebecca remained silent. This was no longer her meeting to manage. Ethan's eyes fell to the partnership documents. If I offered you your restaurant position back today, would you take it? Nia almost smiled. No, a few faces shifted around the table. Ethan nodded slowly. Because of what happened. Because I was already planning to leave. That surprised him. If this partnership moved forward, I was giving notice Friday. She touched the edge of her laptop. Waiting tables paid my bills while I built this. I respect that work too much to pretend it was beneath me, and I respect myself too much to stay somewhere simply because the owner feels guilty. Ethan absorbed the words without defending himself. Then Martin cleared his throat. Perhaps we should return to the reason MS. Brooks came here. Nia looked toward the whiteboard. Yes, we still have a broken model. Ethan followed her gaze. Something almost like humility crossed his face. Then let us fix the right problem this time. Nia stood and uncapped the marker. Before she could write, Claire's phone vibrated again. She read the message, and the color in her expression changed. Mr. Caldwell, the operations team just ran Nia's framework against all 214 locations. Ethan turned, and Claire looked at Nia. The pattern from location 6 is not isolated. It appears in 38 restaurants. Nia became very still. Ethan rose again. Yesterday, he had believed he was looking at one employee's failure. This morning, they were staring at a company-wide blind spot. And for the first time, the person everyone waited to hear from was not the billionaire at the head of the table. It was the former waitress standing beside the whiteboard. 38 restaurants. The number hung in the boardroom like a question nobody had prepared to answer. Nia turned from Claire to the screen. Show me the locations. Claire projected the list. Chicago, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Detroit, Cleveland. Restaurants with different menus, different managers, different customers. Yet the same forecasting distortion appeared again and again. Ethan stepped closer. How much has this cost us? His chief financial officer began calculating. Nia shook her head. Not yet. Ethan looked at her. Yesterday, that interruption might have irritated him. Today he waited. If we start with the money, Nia said, we will assume money is the problem. It is only the symptom. Martin folded his hands. Then what is the problem? Nia studied the 38 locations. Your system does not know the difference between more customers and different customers. She pointed toward Detroit. Pull employee notes from this location. Claire searched. Almost nothing appeared. 3 comments in 6 months, she said. Exactly. Nia pointed toward Milwaukee. Now that one. 47 entries appeared. Ethan frowned. Same forecasting error. Completely different participation. Which means participation alone is not enough. Nia walked back to the whiteboard. We need to know whether anyone acted on what employees reported. Claire opened the management logs. The answer came quickly. In most locations, nobody had. Employee observations were collected, stored, summarized, and forgotten. Nia capped the marker. There is your blind spot. Ethan stared at the screen. We have an employee feedback program. You have an employee collection program, Nia replied. Feedback requires something to come back. Nobody challenged her. The operations director shifted in his seat. We cannot redesign 214 restaurants around individual comments. I am not asking you to. Nia reopened her laptop. I am asking the model to identify repeated observations and connect them to measurable changes. If 6 servers notice families arriving an hour earlier, the system tests that against transaction times. If kitchen staff reports repeated waste, it checks purchasing. Human observation becomes a signal, not an order. Ethan studied her diagram. How long to build it? A working revision? 48 hours. Martin gave a short laugh of disbelief. You can rewrite the model in 2 days? No. I can build a testable correction in 2 days. Those are different promises. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. What do you need? Nia looked around the table. Access to raw operational data from 6 locations. 2 high-performing, 2 average, 2 with persistent waste problems. I want managers, servers, hosts, dishwashers, and kitchen staff included. The operations director blinked. Dishwashers? Especially dishwashers. Why? Because they see what comes back on the plates. The room went quiet again. Such a simple answer. Such an obvious source of information. Ethan looked toward his executives and realized nobody had ever suggested asking them. Approved, he said. Rebecca leaned toward Nia. We should discuss the partnership terms before you begin additional work. Ethan nodded. Agreed. Caldwell will cover development costs. Nia's expression changed slightly. Development costs are already covered by Meridian. Then I will increase the licensing offer. No, the word came gently. But immediately, Ethan paused. You have not heard the number. That is why I said no. Martin raised an eyebrow. Nia closed the data window. I do not want yesterday affecting today's valuation. Ethan understood before she explained. You think I would overpay because I feel guilty? I think guilt makes people generous for the wrong reasons. And what would you prefer? A fair evaluation. Ethan leaned against the table. You are making it unusually difficult for me to apologize with money. A few people smiled. Nia did too, barely. Then perhaps money is not the correct language. The humor disappeared from Ethan's face. Not because he was offended, because she was right. Again, Claire interrupted softly. There is one more issue. She had opened staffing records from the 38 locations. The restaurants with the largest forecasting errors also have the highest employee turnover. Nia's eyes sharpened. Ethan moved beside her. Correlation? Maybe, Nia said. But if experienced workers keep leaving, the company keeps losing the people who understand local patterns. Ethan looked at the names scrolling across the screen. Hundreds of employees reduced to rows and dates. For 30 years, he had believed good systems made companies stronger. Nia was showing him something harder. A system could be efficient and still fail if it trained itself not to hear the people inside it. 48 hours, Ethan said quietly. Build the test. Nia nodded. I will. And Ms. Brooks. She turned. Ethan glanced at the staffing records. This time, we start by asking the people we missed. By noon, the boardroom had stopped feeling like a boardroom. Jackets hung over chairs. Coffee cups crowded the walnut table. 6 restaurant dashboards filled the main screen, while employee comments moved across Claire's tablet faster than anyone could read them. Nia stood near the whiteboard, sorting observations into patterns. Ethan had canceled 2 meetings. Nobody mentioned it. Cleveland, Nia said. Pull the dinner shifts from the last 8 Fridays. Claire brought them up. The restaurant showed strong reservations, weak entree sales, and unusually high appetizer orders. Ethan studied the numbers. Another event pattern? Maybe. Nia opened the employee notes. One host had written the same observation 3 times. Guests arriving before concerts. Limited time. Sharing food. Leaving early. Nia pointed to the comment. There. The operations director frowned. That note is 4 months old. The behavior is not. Nia compared transaction records. The pattern repeated whenever the nearby arena held an event. Ethan leaned closer. We have been ordering for full dinners when customers are coming in for 40-minute meals. And scheduling as if they will occupy tables for 90 minutes, Nia added. Martin slowly nodded. So we waste food and turn away customers because the system thinks tables are unavailable longer than they actually are. Exactly. Nia wrote another correction on the board. Nobody questioned why a former waitress was leading the room anymore. By early afternoon, the test model had changed shape. Employee observations were no longer treated as loose comments. They became context signals connected to transactions, local events, weather, and actual dining duration. Still, Nia refused to call it solved. Run Detroit, she said. Claire did. The revised model improved the forecast by 6%. Milwaukee improved by 9%. Cleveland by 11%. Martin leaned forward. That is significant. Nia shook her head. It is promising. Ethan looked at her. You really dislike celebrating early. Celebrating early is how people stop checking their work. He glanced at the receipt from last night, still folded inside his notebook. I am beginning to understand that. Then the Indianapolis test loaded. The result was worse. Not slightly worse. The revised model missed actual demand by nearly 14%. The room fell silent. The operations director exhaled. There goes the theory. Nia stared at the screen. Rebecca watched her carefully. This was the moment investors feared. The moment a founder became emotionally attached to being right. Nia simply pulled out a chair and Saturday good. Martin laughed once. You said that last time. Because failure is information when you stop taking it personally. Ethan watched her scroll through the raw data. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She ignored the financial summaries and opened employee schedules instead. Why did this location lose 7 experienced servers in 2 months? Claire checked. 3 transferred. 2 resigned. 1 returned to school. 1 moved out of state. Nia opened the replacement dates. And the new staff started just before the forecast errors increased. Ethan understood first. They did not know the neighborhood yet. Nia nodded. The model assumes employee observations carry equal contextual value. They do not. Experience matters. Martin pointed toward the screen. Then weight comments by seniority. No, Nia answered immediately. A new employee can notice something a veteran misses. Seniority is not the same as accuracy. Then how do you weight it? Nia became quiet. She looked at the data, then toward Ethan. We do not weight the person. Ethan waited. We weight the observation against what happens next. She stood and returned to the board. If someone reports a pattern and transactions repeatedly confirm it, confidence rises. If reality does not confirm it, confidence falls. The system learns which observations are useful without deciding which employees are important. Ethan stared at the sentence she had written. Not which employees are important. Yesterday, he had done exactly that with no algorithm at all. He had seen a billionaire and a waitress and assumed he knew where authority belonged. Claire began entering the change. 20 minutes later, Indianapolis improved. Not perfectly. Enough. Martin looked around the table. I think we have what we need to recommend the partnership. Rebecca opened her folder. Then we should discuss final terms. Ethan did not reach for the contract. Not yet. Nia turned toward him. What is missing? Ethan looked at the employee records, then at her. Yesterday, you protected Tyler because you believed one mistake should not define him. Nia waited. Today, you built a system around the same principle. Her expression softened slightly. Ethan continued. Before this company signs anything, I need to know whether the people working in these restaurants trust us. Enough to tell us the truth. Martin frowned. How do you propose measuring that? Ethan looked toward the city below, then back at Nia. We stop asking from the 41st floor. By 3:30 that afternoon, Ethan Caldwell was standing inside a restaurant kitchen instead of behind a boardroom table. He had chosen the Michigan Avenue location first, not because its numbers were the worst, but because it was close enough that nobody could hide behind travel schedules. Nia walked beside him with her laptop bag over one shoulder. Claire followed with a tablet. No executive entourage. No announcement. Ethan had insisted on that. Still, the moment employees recognized him, the room changed. Conversations shortened. Backs straightened. A cook wiped an already clean counter. Ethan noticed every reaction. They are nervous, he said quietly. Of course they are, Nia replied. You sign their paychecks. I do not personally sign them. Nia gave him a look. That is not the point. Ethan almost smiled. They started with servers. Ethan asked what changed customer behavior from week to week. The answers were careful. Weather. Holidays. Reservations. Everything sounded like a corporate report. Nia listened for 5 minutes, then asked a different question. What happened last week that made your shift harder? A server named Melissa answered immediately. The theater changed its evening schedule. Another server nodded. Everyone came in at once around 5:15. A host added. Then half the dining room emptied before 7. Nia looked toward Ethan. He understood. Different question. Different truth. They moved to the kitchen. A prep cook explained that certain vegetables were consistently overordered on concert weekends. A dishwasher named Luis mentioned that one side dish came back nearly untouched whenever families with younger children filled the dining room. Ethan turned toward him. How long have you noticed that? Luis hesitated. Maybe a year. Did anyone ask? Another pause. Not really. Ethan absorbed the answer without defending the company. Nia wrote it down. Then they reached the employee break area, where Tyler sat halfway through a sandwich. The Teenager stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Mr. Caldwell. Ethan stopped several feet away. Yesterday, Tyler had barely been more than a frightened face near the kitchen doors. Today, Ethan forced himself to actually look. 17. Cheap tie. School backpack beneath the table. A chemistry textbook sticking out of one pocket. Sit down, Tyler, Ethan said. The boy remained standing. Nia stayed near the doorway. She did not rescue either of them from the discomfort. Ethan drew out the chair across from Tyler and sat first. That finally convinced the boy to sit. I read the incident report. Tyler swallowed. Yes, sir. You entered the wrong table number. Yes, sir. Nia corrected it before the food left the kitchen. Yes, sir. Ethan rested his hands on the table. Why did she take responsibility? Tyler looked toward Nia. She gave him nothing except patience. Because she thought you would fire me. Ethan's eyes lowered. Was she right? Tyler took a breath. I thought so too. The words landed harder than accusation would have. Ethan looked around the small break room. A refrigerator hummed in the corner. Someone had taped a child's drawing beside the schedule. Employee birthdays were written on a dry erase board. None of this existed in his quarterly reports. I handled yesterday badly, Ethan said. Tyler blinked. Sir, you made a mistake. I made an assumption. Those are different things. Tyler stared at him, unsure what response was expected. Ethan continued. You are not losing your job. Relief crossed the teenager's face. Thank you. But you are going to retrain on the ordering system. Tyler nodded quickly. Absolutely. Ethan stood, then paused. And next time something goes wrong, tell the truth before someone else has to protect you from it. Tyler looked toward Nia, then back at Ethan. I will. Outside the break room, Ethan walked several steps before speaking. You knew I needed to hear that from him. Nia adjusted the strap of her laptop bag. You needed to hear it from someone who could not afford to say it easily. Ethan stopped. Through the kitchen doorway, employees moved through the dinner preparations with practiced rhythm. People he had spent years calling labor costs, staffing percentages, retention numbers. How many locations can we visit before tomorrow? He asked. Nia studied him. If you are serious, 3 more. I am serious. Then take off the jacket. Ethan looked down at his tailored suit. Why? Because nobody tells the billionaire what is wrong while he looks like he came to inspect them. For a second, his old expression returned, slightly offended, almost amused. Then he removed the jacket, folded it over his arm, and loosened his tie. Nia nodded toward the kitchen. Better. Ethan glanced at her. You enjoy this more than you admit. A little. It was the first time he heard her laugh. Small. Genuine. Gone almost immediately. Then Luis approached from the dish station, holding a printed waste sheet. Mr. Caldwell? Ethan turned. The man hesitated. There is something else you should probably see. Ethan took the paper. Nia stepped beside him. The numbers showed a pattern neither of them had expected, and this time, it had nothing to do with customer behavior. Luis held the waste sheet with both hands, as if he was not sure whether handing it over would cause trouble. Ethan noticed that hesitation now. 2 days earlier, he might have mistaken it for uncertainty. Show me, he said. Luis pointed to 3 columns. These are the items coming back from private dining events. Not regular tables. Nia leaned closer. The numbers were remarkably consistent. Premium sides, bread service, desserts, large quantities prepared, served, and returned almost untouched. How long? Nia asked. At least 8 months, Luis said. Maybe longer. Ethan looked toward the restaurant manager. Why is this not in the waste reporting? The manager shifted his weight. Private events are calculated separately. Their margins are strong enough that nobody flagged it. Nia looked at Ethan. There is the problem. Profit is hiding waste. And waste is hiding behavior. She asked Luis what he had noticed. He explained that corporate events routinely ordered preset packages designed for maximum choice, but guests rarely ate everything. Dishwashers saw the leftovers every night. Servers saw untouched plates. Kitchen staff knew which trays returned full. The financial reports only saw profitable contracts. Ethan studied the page. So we optimized revenue and stopped asking whether the product made sense. Nia nodded. A profitable mistake is still a mistake. Claire photographed the sheet and sent it to finance. Within minutes, the answer came back. Across 38 locations, private dining waste represented nearly $3 million annually. Martin called Ethan immediately. Ethan put the call on speaker. We should finalize the partnership today, Martin said. The board has enough evidence. Rebecca joined by phone from Meridian. We agree. We can circulate documents within the hour. Ethan looked at Nia. She did not celebrate. She was still studying Luis's sheet. There is another matter, Martin continued. Yesterday's employment incident has reached the board. Ethan's expression hardened slightly. How? It was included in the internal review. Several directors are concerned about reputational exposure. Nia looked up. Martin continued carefully. Ms. Brooks, given what happened, we need to ask whether you believe Mr. Caldwell's conduct compromises this partnership. The kitchen seemed to become quieter around them. Ethan said nothing. This was no longer his question to control. Nia could have described the humiliation. She could have repeated his words. She could have made one difficult evening the defining story of Ethan Caldwell. Nobody in that room would have blamed her. Instead, she set the waste sheet on the counter. What happened matters, she said. Martin waited. Mr. Caldwell judged me before he understood the situation. He made a decision too quickly, and I paid for it. Ethan lowered his eyes. Then you believe the board should consider disciplinary action? I believe the board should consider what he does after learning he was wrong. Silence followed. Nia continued. If you remove him from this project to make yesterday disappear, you have learned the wrong lesson. Martin sounded surprised. You are defending him? No, her answer was immediate. I am refusing to do to him what he did to me. Ethan looked at her. Nia's voice stayed calm. One bad decision should not erase everything a person can become after it. That principle cannot only apply when the person making the mistake is 17 and bussing tables. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Luis quietly returned to his station. The dishwasher had delivered his information. The powerful people could decide what to do with it. Martin finally said, What would accountability look like to you? Nia glanced around the kitchen. Ask the employees. Ethan raised his eyes. She continued, Not about me. About the system that made it easy for one executive decision to end someone's job before the facts were complete. Ethan understood. This was larger than an apology. Claire, he said, suspend immediate terminations at company-owned restaurants until we review the process. Claire nodded. Effective when? Now. Nia watched him carefully. Ethan turned toward the manager. And tomorrow morning, I am coming back here. The manager blinked. For another inspection? Ethan looked toward Tyler clearing a table, then toward Luis at the dish station. No, his voice softened. To apologize. Nia said nothing, but something in her eyes changed. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something quieter. The possibility that a man accustomed to being obeyed might finally be learning how to listen. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Caldwell and Rowe at 7:45, 15 minutes before the first employees gathered for their shift meeting. No tailored jacket. No executive assistant beside him. No announcement from corporate. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled once at the wrists and carried a cup of black coffee he barely touched. Nia arrived several minutes later with Rebecca, expecting to review pilot access before returning to the downtown office. When she saw Ethan standing near the employee entrance, she slowed. You came back. Ethan looked at her. I said I would. Nia gave one small nod. Good. By 8 o'clock, servers, hosts, cooks, dishwashers, and managers had gathered near the dining room. Tyler stood near the back beside Luis. The room felt uncertain. Employees were accustomed to executives visiting when something needed correcting. They were not accustomed to one arriving because he needed to correct himself. Ethan stepped forward. For a moment, the polished confidence returned to his face out of habit. Then he looked at Tyler. At Luis. At the empty service station where Nia's red apron had hung 2 nights earlier. I made a decision here that I should not have made, he began. Nobody moved. I terminated an employee before the facts were complete. I believed speed demonstrated leadership. In this case, it demonstrated impatience. Nia watched from near the kitchen doors. Ethan continued. Nia Brooks did not cause the problem at table 12. She accepted responsibility because she was protecting a younger employee. I did not ask enough questions to understand that. Tyler lowered his eyes. Ethan looked toward him. Tyler made an error. Errors require correction. They do not automatically require someone to lose a job. The restaurant manager shifted slightly. Ethan noticed. This is not about blaming management either. The decision was mine. That sentence changed the room. Nia could feel it. People were still cautious, but they were listening differently now. Ethan turned toward the staff. Effective immediately, no employee at a company-owned Caldwell restaurant will be terminated for a single service incident without a documented review and an opportunity to explain what happened. A server near the bar exchanged a glance with another. Ethan saw it. That does not mean standards are lower, he said. It means our standards should include fairness. His eyes found Nia. She did not smile. She did not need to. After the meeting, employees slowly returned to work. Tyler approached Ethan before disappearing toward the service station. Mr. Caldwell? Yes. Thank you for saying it in front of everybody. Ethan looked at the teenager. I made the mistake in front of everybody. Tyler nodded as if that answer made sense. Then he hurried away. Nia remained by the window overlooking the morning traffic. Ethan joined her, leaving several feet between them. Was that what you wanted? He asked. It was not for me. I know. A quiet moment passed. Plates clinked. In the kitchen, someone started the coffee grinder. The restaurant returned to being a restaurant. Ethan reached into his pocket and removed the receipt Nia had written on 2 nights earlier. It was wrinkled from being folded and unfolded. I kept this. Nia looked at it. You should probably stop carrying restaurant trash and expensive shirts. Ethan laughed softly. Probably. Then his expression became serious. I owe you an apology that does not come with a contract attached. Nia waited. Ethan looked directly at her. I was wrong. She said nothing. Not only about the incident. About you. His thumb rested against the edge of the receipt. I saw your uniform and your position, and I decided I understood your value before you had finished speaking. Nia's gaze remained steady. That is closer. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Closer. To an apology. For once, he accepted the correction without resistance. Then let me finish. I am sorry, Nia. She studied him for several seconds. Thank you. No dramatic forgiveness followed. No promise that everything was repaired. Just 2 words received honestly. Ethan exhaled. The board approved the pilot this morning. Under the original valuation? Under the original valuation. No guilt premium? You made your position painfully clear. A faint smile reached her eyes. Good. Ethan handed her the receipt. Nia looked down at the number she had scribbled when she still believed she was walking away from Caldwell Hospitality forever. Keep it, he said. Why? Ethan glanced around the restaurant. Because apparently I was measuring the wrong thing. This time Nia did smile. Then Rebecca approached from across the dining room, carrying a folder. We have a problem. Nia's smile disappeared. Rebecca placed the documents on a nearby table. Meridian reviewed Caldwell's proposed employee feedback system. Legal wants anonymous worker observations excluded from the model. Ethan frowned. Why? Liability. They want every comment attached to an employee identification number. Nia looked toward the kitchen, where Luis was already working and Tyler was setting tables. Her expression hardened with quiet certainty. Then we do. Not sign. Ethan stared at her. The partnership they had spent months building was finally within reach. One clause stood between Nia and everything she had worked for. She closed the folder. People will not tell the truth if telling it puts their paycheck beside their name. Ethan looked at the unsigned agreement, then at the employees moving through the restaurant. 2 days ago, he would have called the clause practical. This morning, practical no longer sounded good enough. For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. The unsigned agreement rested between him and Nia on a table that had served hundreds of strangers but had never held a decision quite like this one. Rebecca waited. Around them, Caldwell and Rowe moved into its morning rhythm. Coffee poured. Silverware clicked. Employees crossed between dining room and kitchen, unaware that one paragraph in a legal document could decide whether their voices became useful information or another reason to remain quiet. Can the clause be changed? Ethan asked. Rebecca nodded carefully. Legal will resist it. That was not my question. Yes, it can be changed. Ethan looked at Nia. Then change it. Rebecca blinked. Caldwell would have to accept additional compliance costs. How much? We do not know yet. Ethan picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. Then we will know after someone calculates them. Nia studied him. 2 days earlier, he had decided her value in less than a minute. Now millions of dollars were waiting on a principle she refused to surrender, and he was not rushing her. Rebecca gathered the documents. I will call Meridian. Tell them anonymous employee observations remain protected, Nia said, and no individual performance decision can be made from the feedback system. Ethan added, Put that in writing. Rebecca nodded and walked away. 6 weeks later, the pilot was running in 12 Caldwell restaurants. Food waste dropped. Forecast accuracy improved. Private event menus became smaller and smarter. More important to Nia, employee participation nearly tripled once workers understood their observations could improve operations without becoming evidence against them. Luis's comments helped. Redesign private dining portions. Tyler completed his retraining and started teaching new busboys the ordering system he had once misunderstood. Nobody became famous. Nobody needed to. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Nia returned to Caldwell and Rowe for the pilot review. She no longer carried the old laptop with the broken hinge. Meridian had replaced it, although she still kept the original in her apartment. Some things deserved retirement without being forgotten. Near the employee room, she stopped. Her old red apron hung from a hook beside the schedule. Someone had washed it. Her black name tag was pinned neatly to the front. Nia touched the fabric with 2 fingers. I told them not to throw it away. Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned. He stood several feet away, holding 2 cups of coffee. Why? She asked. He offered her one. Because I thought you might want it. Nia accepted the cup. And if I do not, then I have misunderstood another waitress. She laughed. Ethan smiled, but his attention shifted toward the dining room. A young server had just spilled coffee across the edge of a table where Ethan's quarterly reports were waiting. The girl froze. Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. 6 weeks earlier, the room might have tightened around his reaction. Ethan looked at the spreading coffee, then at the frightened server. He reached for a towel from the service station. It is coffee, he said. We will survive. The server stared at him. I can replace the reports. Claire has copies. He wiped the table himself, then moved his papers aside so the server could finish cleaning. Nia watched without saying anything. That was the strange thing about change. The important kind rarely announced itself. Sometimes it appeared in a policy, sometimes in a contract, sometimes in a billionaire holding a towel instead of assigning blame. Ethan returned to her. What? He asked. Nia shook her head. Nothing. That did not look like nothing. She took a sip of coffee. Black, exactly the way she preferred it. He had remembered. You are learning. Ethan glanced toward the red apron. Slowly. Slow is fine. Nia looked through the kitchen doors where Tyler was, showing a new employee how to confirm table numbers before submitting an order, as long as it is real. 3 months later, Caldwell Hospitality signed the full partnership with Table Sense Operations. Nia did not become valuable that day. She had been valuable when she carried plates, when she worked after midnight on a damaged laptop, when she protected a frightened teenager, and when nobody important knew her name. The partnership merely forced powerful people to notice what had already been there. Ethan learned something too. Standards could measure performance. Money could measure profit. Data could measure patterns. But character revealed itself differently. It appeared in who took responsibility when excuses were available, who listened when rank made listening optional, and who chose kindness when power made kindness unnecessary. Nia never asked Ethan to become smaller so she could stand taller. She simply refused to become smaller for him. And somewhere between a folded red apron and an unsigned contract, he finally understood that respect was not something powerful people handed down. It was something every person deserved before they had proved anything at all. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Hidden Table and join a community that believes true character is revealed not by power or status, but by courage, integrity, and kindness. Thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll save you a seat at the hidden tables.